Hello, recently alongside my normal work, I've been helping my family perform an engine swap on a Nissan Micra for a customer. This swap involves putting the QG18 engine from Nissan Almera into the Micra. As I've just been coming down on my days off to help out with whatever work is available, certain stuff I wasn't able to get pictures of because it was done when I was away. And also as well, where I'm kind of helping them out, it's much harder to get video footage stuff done, so this video will probably be predominantly just a slideshow with me talking over what we did and why. So this video won't be a guide on how to do it. For this swap, the customer provided both the cars as well as some additional parts as well to use to fit the engine into the Micra. The first step in doing an engine swap is obviously removing the engines from both the cars. Many of the standard mountings and tubing and linkages were all kept from both the cars in case they could be used later on. Once the engine was out the Almera, it was cleaned and prepared, ready to be fitted into the Micra. We wanted to remove the engine wiring loop through the engine bay, as it meant that we wouldn't need to remove the rubber grommets that seal against the bulkhead. However, we found that you couldn't get the plug that goes into the ECU out past the heater, the matrix and everything inside the car, so as such we have to remove the dash to get it out. Removing the dash wasn't too difficult. It mainly just consisted of kind of unscrewing screws wherever necessary and pulling bits out and unplugging them so they could be removed. There were certain bits of trim and plugs that needed to be popped off, but I didn't manage to get much picture of that, so I recommend if you are trying to do this, go and find a guide on how to remove the dash, because as I said, kind of certain stuff like this I just wasn't able to capture. In the bottom left of this picture you can see the heater matrix and everything. It's a case of just undoing the screws holders in and removing it, and then you should then easily be able to get the plug out through the hole in the bulkhead. We also relocated the fuel breather line from the front of the tank to the back of the car. This was done by getting a bit of fuel safe hosing, feeding it in through the chassis rail at the back of the car, and then getting someone else to pull it out when it appeared at a hole near the front, and then connecting this up. Also as well, on the areas where it was like rubbing against any metal or was very close to it, bigger hosing was slit and then put around the tube like a sleeve to protect it, so hopefully it shouldn't wear through. Once it was all connected up, the excess hose was just cut off. The customer provided a set of engine mounts for this, which made it much easier fitting the engine in as we didn't have to fabricate them. Originally we'd hoped to use the standard Micra gearbox mounting, but unfortunately the angle of this in the car we weren't quite happy with, so we decided to polybush it instead so that we could shift the bushing ever so slightly over to correct this. With the engine now fitted in the car, we could go around double checking the clearances and seeing where any alterations needed to be made to the chassis in order for the engine to fit safely in the car. We found the rear right of the engine was quite close to the chassis leg, so we cut a notch into it and welded a new metal in there to make a little pocket for it to sit in to ensure that there was clearance there. The intake was also very close to the brake reservoir cylinder, so such as had to be ground away a little bit to ensure clearance, and the brake booster cylinder, which had to be formed slightly to ensure that there was a room for the intake. Due to clearances with the chassis, it wasn't possible to use the standard water pump from the engine, as it wouldn't fit, and also there was no way to run a belt to it as well. We replaced the standard water pump with a new electric one that could be mounted elsewhere in the engine bay. We also decided as well that we would also reuse the standard mounting on top of the gearbox from the Almera as well, which required us to cut the mounts out of the chassis of the Almera and weld them in on the Micra so it had something to bolt into. Next was fitting the bracing that goes under the engine. Once again this required a bit of modification in order to fit in the car and work. So first we had to weld some mounts onto the rear of it, as well as fitting a new polybush mount to the front of it. Reinforcements were also added to it to increase its strength as well. The bracing that bolts to the engine on the rear also had to be modified as well by shifting the mounting holes ever so slightly downwards to make it fit better. Next was fitting the radiator in it. We were reusing the radiator from the Almera, but in order to make it fit the Micra, we had to cut the sides out of the front of the Micra, and also cut the top out of the bracing across the bottom. A plate was then welded in, one to give the radiator something to sit on, and two to add some support there to reinforce it from where we cut the bits out. Next was fitting the hydraulic clutch into the Micra, which involved bolting the actuator back onto the gearbox, but also fitting the valve from the Almera into the Mikra's engine bay, as well as making a bracket and mounting the reservoir for it as well. Next was installing the gear linkages and gear stick back into the car. We placed a shift plate in there, and as well as this was sealed by some double-sided sticky foam pads which put around the edge of the hole that can be seen in the. Next we fitted the Micra gear linkage to see if it would line up, and if not, how far off it was by, which turned out to be probably about a couple of centimetres or so. To solve this, it was decided to modify the Micra gear linkage. So to do this, we cut the end off it in a straight section so it'd be easier to weld a new bit in, and then we used a pipe to see how much longer it needed to be made. As well as doing this, we fitted a short shifter for the Micras, as it would lower the mounting point for the gear linkage onto the gear stick, which would help with some clearance issues that there were at the front end. Thank you for watching. I shall try and get an update on this project done as soon as possible and posted, and if you want to see that, then subscribe.